various people in the U.S. government have been threatening to go to war with Iran for years. We haven't done it, thank God, because Iran is far more powerful than Iraq. Iran is actually a very powerful country. They actually have a rather powerful military, even though they spend 0.8% of what the U.S. does on military. 0.8%. For the U.S. to actually fully go into Iran, it would be the most horrific bloodbath you could ever imagine, not to mention, yet again, putting us all on the brink of nuclear war because Iran has allies with nuclear weapons. But here has been Biden's response to the so-called Iran-backed Iraqi militia hit that killed 3 soldiers. The U.S. plans a weeks-long bombing campaign against Iranian targets. The White House says the U.S. response to the Jordan drone attack won't be a one-off. Let me just remind you that the Pentagon, I played the clip on the last live stream, the Pentagon has said that they don't actually have evidence that Iran was behind this drone that killed 3 U.S. troops. They said that they believe Iran backs these Iraqi militias in the past, and therefore this is an Iranian-backed militia that struck 3 U.S. troops. But they have no evidence that Iran had anything to do providing the drone or giving them the target or anything else with this attack on U.S. troops. That doesn't matter to the U.S. because the real target for the U.S. is Iran. We're really after Iran because they are the most powerful country in the region that is not within the central banking tentacles of our control, that has not been brought to heel, that is outside of the petrodollar. They obviously have tons of oil, but really it's that doesn't matter. That matters less because we want to steal the oil than it matters because they are one of the largest perpetrators of selling oil outside of the petrodollar. So that is the biggest thing upsetting to the U.S. And of course, the fact that despite the U.S. cooing them years ago, back in the 50s, they are now outside for years now, decades now, outside of U.S. control. This doesn't mean that everybody in Iran loves their government. There are plenty of people in Iran who don't. Understandably, but I would say that for every nation state. I don't know a nation state where everyone loves their government. I think that's quite rare, which is one of the many reasons nation states are stupid. But the push for war with Iran, which has gone on for years. This is coming from David Swanson, worldbeyondwar.org, which is a great outlet. David Swanson's been doing the anti-war work for years and years. He has a lot of books out there, does great work. The urgent need to attack Iran has been falsely advertised for 20 years. A lot of this article gets into very intricate details about all the propaganda against Iran, and I highly recommend you read the whole article if you want to learn more about this ongoing decades-long effort to destroy Iran. He talks about how Iran has spent 0.8% last year or 2 years ago on military spending, 0.8% of what the U.S. spends. He also shows a map of the U.S. military installations surrounding Iran, which I'm sure it makes them feel like they're in a very peaceful world, right? If you had U.S. military installations surrounding your country. And as many people have pointed out, that's their own fault for putting their country in between all our military installations. You shouldn't have done that. When they were voting on where to put the country, why there? It's on them. The U.S. overthrew Iran's democracy in 1953 and installed a brutal dictator and a weapons customer. The U.S. gave Iran nuclear energy technology, keyword energy technology, in the 1970s. Following the Iranian Revolution, the United States aided Iraq in the 1980s in attacking Iran. So the U.S. was allied with Iraq, helped them attack Iran, gave Iraq chemical weapons to attack Iran with. Then we insisted Iraq had chemical weapons later after 2001 because we no longer were allied with Iraq. They had gone outside the petrodollar. We didn't like them anymore. And so we said they have chemical weapons. Now, we thought they did partially because we gave them chemical weapons. But as many of the weapons inspectors would tell you, they had gotten rid of all their chemical weapons because they were told to, and they didn't want to be invaded. But the U.S. did it anyway. And the U.S. knew At the time, the U.S. knew they were lying. The roots of a Washington push for a new war on Iran can be found in the 1992 Defense Planning Guidance, the 1996 paper called A Clean Break, a new strategy for securing the realm, the 2000 Rebuilding America's Defenses, and the 2001 Pentagon memo described by Wesley Clark about invading 7 countries in 5 years: Iraq, Libya, Somalia, Sudan, Lebanon, Syria, and Iran. In 2000, the CIA gave Iran nuclear bomb plans in an effort to frame it. This has been well documented. It was even reported on by James Risen at the New York Times. The CIA gave nuclear weapon information plans to Iran in order to frame it. Jeffrey Sterling went to prison for allegedly being Risen's source. So the leaker goes to prison. You guys are familiar with that. Julian Assange, even though he's not a leaker, he's a publisher, but nobody involved in the scheme was ever punished in any way. So the CIA does horrible shit. Then the person who reveals it goes to prison. Same with CIA officer John Kiriakou. He was the only one to reveal the CIA's torture program against the Geneva Conventions. He reveals it to the press, and then he is the only one to have ever gone to prison for the CIA's torture program or anything connected to it. He was not involved in it. He just revealed it. In 2010, Tony Blair included Iran on a list of countries that he said Dick Cheney had aimed to overthrow. For many years, the U.S. has labeled Iran an evil nation, attacked and destroyed the other non-nuclear nations on the list of evil nations, designated part of Iran's military a terrorist organization. By the way, that is one of the best pieces of propaganda the U.S. has done is by designating part of Iran's military as a terrorist organization. You can now justify all kinds of sanctions and aggressions and belligerence and, oh, they're terrorists, which, of course, the biggest terrorist entity on the face of the earth is the U.S. military. I mean, you have to be a genius to know that. The U.S. Drops tens of thousands of bombs every single year. You know how many bombs China dropped last year? 0. You know how many bombs they dropped the year before that? 0. You know how many bombs they dropped the year before that? 0. You know how much they spend on military? A tiny fraction of what the U.S. spends. You know how many bases China has, military bases outside of China? 1. I think they might be adding another, though, so it might be 2. Meanwhile, the U.S. has 800 to 900 military bases around the world. The U.S. flew drones over Iran, openly and illegally threatened to attack Iran, and built up military forces all around Iran's borders while imposing cruel sanctions on the country. And David Swanson didn't even mention that the U.S. assassinated with a drone bomb the top Iranian military general. In 2007, that was under Donald Trump. In 2007, we were told that Iran needed to be attacked urgently due to false claims about nuclear weapons, which Iran, despite allowing in all the inspectors, has never been proven to have nuclear weapons. Also, there's a lot of very smart, very informed people who say that Iran has never had or worked with nuclear weapons. In 2015, Republicans urged war justified by Iran's nuclear weapons program, while Democrats successfully moved for a passage of an agreement with Iran under Obama, right? You remember that, the nuclear deal, which took many years and a lot of work to try and get some sort of deal that would stop this ongoing threats of war against Iran. But Trump pulled out of the deal. And as you recall, here's garbage liberal world. Trump pulls out of the deal. At the time, I believe, Rachel Maddow and the liberal world and all your liberal friends go, oh my God, Trump's out of his mind. He pulled out of that nuclear deal with Iran. He's just tearing up agreements. They were furious, right, at the time. Then Biden gets into office, could easily restart that process, could easily get back into an agreement with Iran, even though Iran would be like, you tear up your agreements. Why would we sign a deal with you? But still, he could have. Biden did none of that, right? Biden pushed for war. He's arguably pushed for war equal to or more than Trump. At least Biden hasn't assassinated any Iranian generals yet. In 2017, whereas hilariously, while they've been doing all this, here's a secret. I'm going to reveal it. Oh, this is a deep, dark secret. I don't even know if I can say this on live stream. I don't know if I should do it, but I think I'm going to do it. Here's a secret. Israel has nuclear weapons. Oh, damn it. Did I let the cat out of the bag? Yes, Israel, of course, has nuclear weapons. Former government officials have said that, even though they were called traitors when they did. There's been other sources. The Pentagon, deep in some documents, even admitted Israel has nuclear weapons. Everyone knows Israel has nuclear weapons, but they don't admit it, because if they admitted it, then they would be inspected. And the U.S. and Israel making sure their nuclear weapons are not inspected. Whereas Iran, who does not have a nuclear program, it's like every 3 seconds, we need to inspect your non-existent program to see that it's non-existent. In 2017, the U.S. ambassador to the United Nations claimed that Iranian weapons had been used in a war that the U.S., Saudi Arabia, and allies were illegally and disastrously waging in Yemen. While that's a problem that should be corrected, it is hard to find a war anywhere on the planet without U.S. weapons in it. In fact, a report that made news the same day as the ambassador's claims pointed to the long-known fact that many of the weapons used by ISIS had once belonged to the United States. So in that way, you should say ISIS is U.S.-backed. I mean, they're using U.S. weapons. That's U.S.-backed. Okay, so why do we not call ISIS U.S.-backed ISIS? It should be. Yet every militia that the U.S. gets in a spat with is an Iranian-backed militia, right? Anything done to the U.S. in the region is Iran-backed. Iran-backed this, Iran-backed that. Anything Yemen does, they call Iran-backed. They're just yelling Iran-backed everywhere. Meanwhile, ISIS using U.S. weapons. Al-Qaeda using U.S. weapons. Al-Nusra using U.S. weapons. Many of these Al-Qaeda and Al-Qaeda offshoots were literally funded by the U.S. for a time when it was useful for us. So all of these should be called U.S.-backed. It should be U.S.-backed Al-Qaeda, U.S.-backed Taliban, U.S.-backed ISIS. Literally, years ago in the war in Afghanistan, the U.S., and this was reported by the New York Times and others, was paying the Taliban lots of money so that the Taliban would let them through the mountain roads where you basically had to use one road or you couldn't get through, paying Taliban lots of money so that the U.S. could fight the Taliban. So we'd pay the Taliban to let us through so we could fight them somewhere else. President Biden came into office. I'm almost done with this, by the way. Came into office with the possibility wide open to restore the Iran agreement and pursue a better course. He did not at all. Of course, many in the U.S. government and military oppose attacking Iran, although key figures like Admiral William Fallon have been moved out of the way for saying that we should not attack Iran. Much of the Israeli military is opposed as well, not to mention the Israeli and U.S. people who are opposed to attacking Iran. But war is not clean or precise. If the people we allow to run our nations attack another, we are all at risk. Because they're all psychopaths that run these countries and that run the U.S. and Israel. And war is good for the U.S.